Welcome back to Web Chats, where today's guest is Lisa Bajor. She's one of our doctoral students, as well as a qualitative researcher and a classroom teacher as well. So she does it all. So welcome and thank you for joining us today, Lisa.
Thank you, Dr. Ortlieb, and everyone.
So we want to talk about really how do you conduct a literature review? That's going to be the topic of today's discussion, and we have a few questions to guide that. And the first one is really, what are the first steps if we're trying to conduct a literature review that we have to think about in this process, Lisa?
Well, I think the first thing that you have to really think about is what you want to research. I'll just use my topic as a reference point. So I'm doing small group peer-led discussions. And so the first thing, of course, that you need to do is look up articles that are relevant to what you're doing. So I usually start with the St. John's Library database. I usually use Eric EBSCO or PsycInfo. And if that's not too successful, I can go to Google Scholar, which is also very good.
Gotcha. So yeah, I totally agree with using the databases after you choose your topic. Maybe you think about the research questions that are going to guide your study, and then you want to go see what's out there in the extant literature. And I think for me, another consideration is thinking about the scope of your study, right? So do you need to go back 100 years to see what's been done? Maybe you only need to go back to maybe 2000 or so with No Child Left Behind. It really kind of depends upon the scope in terms of a time range, as well as maybe how comprehensive the literature review is. If it's for a master's class, maybe you only need 5 or 10 references.
Yes,
if it's for a dissertation project, it could be infinite, right?
Yes, definitely.
So yeah, it kind of depends. The second question that I wanted to talk about is, how do you organize your literature? I know there's a lot of different ways and some new technologies out there that some people sort of gravitate towards. What do you do?
Well, I used to make hard copies of every article that I found, and that was great in one respect because I actually had it right in front of me all the time, and I could always refer to it, and several of them at a time. But then I just ran out of space in my house, so I actually took a class on RefWorks, and that was a lifesaver because it saved me a lot of space and a lot of ink, and it gave me a way to organize all my citations, and it actually cites all your articles for you so that when you're ready to print out the references, it's right there. And this way you can also put them into folders. So if you want to start categorizing for your lit review, you can put some articles in one folder and some other articles in another folder so that you're kind of organized even prior to starting what you're writing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those citation management software programs like RefWorks, Zotero, and the like are sort of the new age and what most people are doing. I know a middle step, would sort of be using electronic folders, whether it be Dropbox, Google Drive, what have you, and sort of keeping all of your goods, according to different themes or topics that way. And of course, as you mentioned, some of us have used the older style of hard copy stacks, which can be burdensome and tough to carry with you, on your travels. So I highly suggest the other two approaches these days for sure. And then when you think about literature reviews, one of the main premises is they always talk about identifying the gap in the extant literature. Can you tell me sort of some approaches you use for that?
Sure. Well, I just look at all the articles that I have that are relevant. And what I try to do is read each article and kind of pinpoint what's missing. So I really find something very useful, the limitations component, that section of the study, future research, recommendations. But you could also look in all the sections, the participants, methods, findings, all of the sections that are part of the article, and kind of look for what's missing, any type of gap that hasn't been done, but actually the thing is, I was reading an article that had a very good point, and it was a qualitative article, and the researcher said that no matter if it's almost the same type of study that you're going to be conducting, each researcher brings something different to the data because of the way they conduct it. There's always going to be something different that you're going to be doing, so it's always going to be useful.
It could also be from a different conceptual or theoretical framework, as well as you said, sort of background experiences and what the researcher brings to the table in terms of bias, et cetera. So, for me, I categorize it almost into primary approaches and secondary ones. And the primary ones is sort of just having, a widespread, deep knowledge of what's going on in fluency, right? Historically speaking, as well as some of the emerging and current studies. And so you can almost identify a gap just based on your knowledge alone.
Yes.
And then the secondary ones is, as you said, sort of reading other people's work where they have already identified gaps and sort of piecing those studies together to then, those things will sometimes dictate what's there, what's not there. Even though that can be a slippery slope where you may be making some assumptions based upon other people's work. So it's always good to sort of do a little bit of both, in my opinion. And then the last question that I want to look at is, it's one thing to conduct a literature review. It's another thing to write a synthesized literature review, because many people mistake bibliographic references, a reference list, with a synthesized literature review when they're quite different. So how do you go about writing a lit review?
Initially, I didn't really know the difference, and that was the big problem. But then really what helped me was reading scholarly articles, reading peer review articles, reading other dissertations, the introduction sections. And actually, just through practice, I became more proficient. But I realized that as opposed to a bibliographic synthesis, you don't really have to use every single component of the study. If something just matches in terms of participants or findings or the type of study that it is, you can just use that part. And you can mix authors together. I mean, if someone is finding similar results, then you can put two authors together and kind of, just work from there. But I really found what is useful for me is if I think of it as an argument, trying to argue my case for my study, and I go from a more general aspect of it, and I kind of funnel it down to something that's very, very similar to my study.
I totally like that approach where, you sort of go in with one idea, maybe from an outline, a framework you're going to use. Maybe I'm going to look at some historical studies, maybe I'm going to look at policy, practices, et cetera. And then you sort of group according to some more emergent themes that sort of come up along the way. And I love the last part that you said where, it's okay not to include everything.
Right.
And it could match what you're looking for based upon the research design, the theoretical framework, what they found, the participants, and how, parts of the setting and the population, all those sorts of things. So it doesn't have to be 100% fit. It just has to fit what you're looking for.
Right, right.
So again, I really thank you for joining us today as we talk about how to conduct and write literature reviews. Again, this is Evan Ortlieb and Lisa Bajor bringing you this information, and we welcome a discussion anytime. I hope you'll join me again for another session sometime soon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ortlieb.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Cheers.